Hi everyone, my name is Brad Bearden and I am the product manager for Acctivate. In today's webinar, we will be discussing designing reports for Acctivate in Crystal Reports. First, I'd like to give a brief overview of Crystal Reports and the role it plays in Acctivate. SAP Crystal Reports, or more commonly referred to as just Crystal Reports, is a data reporting tool that can read data from various sources and display it in a document format. There are various Crystal Reports products, but for today's intents and purposes, we'll discuss the Crystal Reports Viewer and the Crystal Reports Designer. The Crystal Reports Viewer is embedded within Acctivate and allows Acctivate to generate and display reports within Acctivate that have been designed in Crystal Reports. The Crystal Reports Designer software is used to create or modify Crystal Report files, which have the extension of .rpt. Crystal Reports Designer is not a requirement for Acctivate. You would only need to purchase it if you want to create or edit reports yourself. Alterity does not sell licenses for Crystal Reports, but you could purchase it directly from SAP or a licensed reseller. Since Acctivate includes the Crystal Reports Viewer, you can still add new or modified reports to Acctivate without purchasing the designer. So for example, if our support team or one of our consulting partners creates or modifies a report for you and sends it to you, you can add that into the report catalog in Acctivate, and it'll run within Acctivate. So Acctivate distributes a supported Crystal Reports runtime for Crystal Reports Viewer embedded in Acctivate, and we will update that from time to time to stay on a supported version. I don't think it's really necessary that we go into that any further. Just know that the Acctivate software updates may include an update to the Crystal Reports Viewer as necessary. Now, if you're planning on buying Crystal Reports Designer so that you can create or modify reports, we would suggest using Crystal Reports 2008 or later. 2008 is a pretty old version, so we would actually suggest using a recent version, Crystal Reports 2016. Okay, so now that we've discussed what Crystal Reports is and the difference between the designer and the viewer and the supported versions, we can answer the question, why does Acctivate use Crystal Reports for its reporting needs? Well, for one, Crystal Reports is extremely popular and therefore widely supported. Between the official SAP documentation, public forums, and third-party resources, there's a seemingly endless supply of information relating to Crystal Reports. I mentioned earlier that Crystal Reports can read data from various sources. Acctivate uses an extremely common database engine in Microsoft SQL Server, and Crystal Reports can connect and read data from SQL Server. And finally, you can just create extremely rich and visually pleasing reports in Crystal Reports. I know it sounds cliche, but you can create a report that matches nearly anything you can imagine within reason, of course. In this day and age, your data is extremely important to you, and being able to quickly and concisely view and share that data is important. So Crystal Reports allows you to create reports that are formatted, calculate and present the data in a way that's useful to you. And we'll see some of that in a moment when we modify a report here. So before we get into that, though, I do want to say that there's a lot of functionality in Crystal Reports, and we are limited on our time today. So I'm going to try and keep this webinar focused on the basics and avoid getting too complex. But I do want to try and cover some of the features and functionality that makes Crystal Reports a powerful reporting program. So now that we've discussed the what and why, let's get into the how and modify a report here. Okay, so in Crystal Reports, the designer, you can create a report from scratch. But if you're new to Crystal Reports, my suggestion would be to start with an existing report if possible, since most of the heavy lifting is already done for you. That way we're only changing what needs to be changed, and we don't have to worry about some of the complex concepts like joining database views. So I know a report in Acctivate that I do want to modify, so I'm going to go into Acctivate and open the report catalog. I'm going to expand the sales orders section and then go to orders. And I want to take a look at the open orders by customer report. So it's right here. I'm going to hit select. And I'm just going to leave the parameters set to all, hit preview. And we're going to take a look at this report. Let's make it full screen here. So when I look at this report, I like a lot about this. Like I said, I want to start with one that has most everything I need, but there's a few things I do want to change. Now in this demo company, use your imagination a little bit. There are price codes, but maybe you don't have price codes. So that column is meaningless. So I want to get rid of that. I know I never give discounts. I'll want to get rid of that. That'll free up some space where I'm going to move some things around. I want to also do something a little nifty with the formatting of the order total here. So if it's over $10,000, that would be a big order in this system. I want it to show in red so it stands out to me. So when I'm looking at it, I can easily catch that. And then I also want to include booked orders. So right now this is only showing scheduled orders. You can see that under the status column. Now it also shows, if I go back here, just so you know, when you're reading these reports, there's a description and it says these are not booked or completed orders. Don't really care about the completed orders, but I do want to include booked orders, I think. And I may want to change the layout a little bit. So I definitely want to start with this report. So the first thing I need to know is the name of the report and really the directory location here. So it's under sales orders, orders, and it was the open orders by customer. Just go ahead and close this, and we're going to go into the configuration manager. And the reason we're going to do that is because the name of the report we saw there is the user-friendly name, but we want to get the file name, that RPT file that I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to expand the order processing, orders. We can scoot this over a little bit, and here it is, open orders by customer. That's what we saw. But the name of the file is openordersbycustomer.rpt. So in this case, it does match. Just be advised that it may not always match exactly, so it is a good idea to come here and find the name of the file. Okay, so now that I know the name, this report here, this report section has the name of the file. It doesn't have the file path, and there's a reason for that I will explain in a moment, but I'm going to tell you the first place we need to go look is the standard report directory. So I'm going to open File Explorer. If you're on the server or wherever Acctivate is installed, the primary installation, you can type in C program files x86. We'll go into Acctivate, and then there's a reports folder here. If you're not on the server, especially if you're on a computer that has Acctivate on it, you can access it using the UNC path, which is just the server name. So my computer is actually called Brad Desktop Acctivate reports. So it'd be / Brad Desktop Acctivate reports, and it gets us to the same folder. Now, once we're in here, though, we have two other folders. We have A4 and letter, and that refers to the dimensions of the report page layout. So in the US, letter is the common size used, and for most everyone in the US, I imagine that's what you're using. If you're outside the US, you may be using A4. It's a common layout. It's a little bit thinner and a little bit taller, I believe, than letter. So the reports are the same. It's just the sizing is a little bit different. So if I go into the letter folder, I'm going to go look for that in their alphabetical here because I have it sorted. Open orders by customer. Now I don't want to open it here. This part's very important. This is the standard report directory. And what that means is that when you install an Acctivate update that we put out, it may change the standard reports some. We may either add new reports or we may make updates to existing reports, change the layout, remove a field maybe that's no longer in use, something like that, or calculation. If we were to make a change and we did all those changes we just talked about to this report and we saved it here, it's very possible that an update in the future may override our changes, and that would be a bad loss. So what we want to do is instead copy this, and you can just right click on it, choose copy, or you can use Control-C, and we're going to put it into another folder called the custom reports folder. We don't want to remove the original. We can just leave it here. Now the custom reports folder is in either C program data alterity Acctivate. You'll see it's here. I'm going to paste it in. And again, that would be if you're on the server, it would be the local folder C program data alterity Acctivate, and then you'll see the custom reports folder. Or if you're on another computer, it would be just like before, Brad Desktop Acctivate reports, and then I'm sorry, Brad Acctivate data, and then custom reports. And we're here again. So your server name, Acctivate data, and then the custom reports folder. Either one works there. Okay, so I have the report moved in here. So what happens is if I go back and Acctivate, let me hit refresh on this since I made a change. So when I click on open orders by customer, I have this red text now that says customized report. I mentioned earlier that we had the report name here, but it doesn't actually show the directory. And that's because Acctivate will look first in the custom reports folder to see if it can find a report that matches this, a report file. And if it does, it'll use that. If not, it'll go to the standard directory. So if you're making any modification to existing reports, as long as you don't rename them, all you have to do is save the modified report in the custom reports folder, and Acctivate will automatically find it and use it for you. So it makes this process a lot simpler. So when I go back into my directory here, I have Crystal Reports installed. So I see, the type is Crystal Reports in the logo. Again, all the Crystal Report files, reports will have this .rpt extension. It can only be opened by Crystal Reports. I just point that out because I know I've seen some people try and rename the extension to PDF or something to open it up, but that's not going to work because these reports are designed to be modified or edited within Crystal Reports. So since I have Crystal Reports installed, I can just double click it to get it open. And when it opens, I'm in design mode. So there are two views, and we'll see in a second. One is design view, and then the other one is the preview view. And the preview view allows us to preview the data from our database within Crystal Reports, which is what I would recommend just because there are a lot of differences between your data and maybe how these fields are laid out. For example, you may have longer product IDs, longer descriptions, or shorter, and you may design your report, and then once you put it in Acctivate, realize that you have to go back and realign everything or widen fields because you didn't have it right the first time. So getting it connected to your database and previewing it in Crystal will let you get a better idea of how that data is going to lay out. Okay, so in order to preview it, I can hit F5. There are a lot of shortcuts, or I can go to View, Print Preview. And we'll talk about these in a second, but I'm going to click OK on this, and it's going to get to the connection screen. So in this case, this report has been connected to an Acctivate database before when it was originally designed. So it's just going to ask for the SQL Server credentials. However, if you are setting up the connection from scratch, you'll start with a screen like this, and you'll need to make sure that you choose the Microsoft Olay DB provider for SQL Server. So there's various options, but it's going to be this one that you want to choose, and you'll click next, and then you'll get to this screen. So the first field is for the server name. Now that's not necessarily the name of your server, but the SQL Server. Now the SQL Server will usually have part of the server name in it. So in my case, it would be, we saw earlier, it was Brad Desktop /Acctivate. That's the default SQL Server name when Acctivate installs SQL for you. It uses the server name and then Acctivate, /Acctivate. Now, if someone else installed SQL for you prior to Acctivate, you may need to verify the SQL Server name. Prior to that, it said local. If you're running Crystal Reports on the server where Acctivate's installed, you can just use local and it'll find it rather than naming the computer. But if you're on another workstation, you would definitely want to use the computer name. The next field is the user ID. Now, this is not your Windows user ID. This is the SQL Server user ID. Again, when Acctivate is installed, we do install SQL Server if you don't already have an instance of SQL installed. And when we install SQL, we leave just the one default SQL user, which is SA, which stands for System Administrator. If someone else has set up your SQL Server, installed it for you, or configured it for you, they may have another user they want you to use here. But I think for most of our users, using the SA user ID is the best way to connect, maybe the only way. And the next is the password field. This would be the password for the user ID SA. We have a standard password that we use when Acctivate's installed. We do a really good job of not sharing that in any public forum like these webinars or on our help articles, but it is available to you. So if you call or contact our support team, we can give you that password. And again, to be redundant, if someone set it up for you, they may have changed that password. So you may need to get that password from someone else. Now, once I've got the server name, the user ID, and the password, I can click in the database dropdown, and it's going to show me the databases available to connect to. If I had tried to do that at the beginning, that dropdown would have appeared blank because Crystal Reports needs to know the SQL server, SQL ID, SQL password in order to get this list and present it to you. Now I have two databases. I have Demo, which everyone has. Acctivate is installed with the Demo database, but I set up another database called Demo2 intentionally just for this demonstration. I'll show you why in a moment. But we're going to select Demo2. Okay, so before I move on, there is another option here that says integrated security. This is another way of connecting to SQL without using the user ID and password. Instead of providing those credentials, SQL will allow you to connect using the Windows user that you're logged in as. Out of the box, when Acctivate installs SQL, that's not configured, and it would require additional configuration. So I expect that most people don't have that set up, but if you do and you select that, you'll see it grays these out as not being used. It'll use your Windows information. But again, that does require additional configuration, so we don't need to go into that anymore. I can click finish here. There's another screen. If I click next, there's some advanced options, but there's really nothing in there that we would ever need to change. So I'm going to click finish. Okay, and when it connects, Crystal Reports will verify the database, which we see up here, and it sees there's been a change to the orders table. So whenever Acctivate updates, we may change the database views that are used in the report. We may make some small changes, and I'll explain that in a second. And so it's just refreshing the database views in the report so they're up to date. So we can just click OK on that, and now it's up to date. Okay, so now that I've clicked finish, the report previews with the data. However, this may not actually be the data from your live database. So later versions of Crystal Reports will store the database name with the database objects. That means that when you preview the report against your live database, it may still show demo data since the database name was stored with the database views that are used in the report. Now we have an article that explains how to update the database views and relink them so that it's up-to-date information, but I'm going to go through that real quick. So if I go to database, set data source location, it'll open up this window. Now the top window shows the database source and the views used in the report, but since our standard reports were made against the Acctivate $demo database, and everyone has that database, we need to update the views so that the report is using the views by the same name from your database, the one that we connected to. So a quick comment on just what a view is. I know I've used that word over and over and I haven't explained it yet, but you're probably familiar with the concept of a database table. The tables hold the data and a view is built on top of those tables. So this structure allows the views to hold data from multiple tables, which makes them more useful to us for building these reports because a view may contain data from multiple tables and it combines into a single view. There also tend to be more user-friendly information, such as the product class name. The table doesn't always include the product class ID. It may only have the unique identifier that represents the product class ID. And tables are subject to change also, whereas we try and keep the views from changing to ensure backwards compatibility with reports, for example. All right, so these are the views. And what I need to do is I need to come down to our source here. I'm going to expand this. expand my database, activate $demo2, expand DBO, and then I had the option to choose, do I want to see a list of tables or views? And we always want to use views. I'm going to expand tables so you can see that all the tables will be preceded by TB to indicate they're a table. All the views will not have that. Now, for the most part, they're going to be named the same. There's going to be some views that exist that don't have a corresponding table, and it's because they're made up of multiple tables. But I want to go down to, oh, sorry, too far. I'm going to go to customer. So I click on customer at the top, I click on customer on the bottom, and I hit update. And I'm going to go to order detail at the top, order detail at the bottom, and click update, orders. We'll just do this for all of them. There's only 4, so it's not too bad. It's a little bit tedious, but it definitely works. So again, the issue is that the report says we need to pull from the customer view. However, Crystal Report says that as activate $demo customer, whereas now we're connected to activate $demo2 customer, and all else being equal, the fields in the database are the same, so it doesn't see that as being an issue or being different. All right, so now when I come down here, I do have Western Industries. It has now been relinked to the correct database. So that's a step you may go through. I know I did that very quickly. It is pretty straightforward, but we do have an article on our website, on our knowledge base, if you need to refer back to that. Okay, so now that we have the data in here, let's start editing it. And I'm in the preview mode, which is nice, again, because I can see all the information in front of me. The design view gives us the fields and the text objects in the report, but the preview is going to show us, the values that populate all that. So I know for sure I want to get rid of discount percent. So I'm going to delete the discount percent field, and I also need to get rid of this text object that's just at the header here. And then I want to come over and I'm going to go ahead and remove price code. Again, even though we have it, let's pretend like we don't, but even if we do use price codes, maybe I don't care, I just need the price. So the preview mode is great for previewing the data. I do find it a little difficult and frustrating sometimes to try and edit data, move it around and rearrange things in this mode, because it's easy to get a little bit, off, and when you come over here, you realize it shifted everything down. So I do prefer working in the design mode a lot of times. So we've removed that. Let's make some space to add in a new field. So I'm going to scoot this over. And some of the reports may have these vertical guidelines already in there, which is nice because, as you can see, when I move this, the text field and the database field have snapped to this, and it allows me to move both of them at the same time. Alternatively, if I just wanted to move one, when you click on a field, whether it's a text object or a data field, there are 4 boxes, one on each side, and that allows you to extend the length or height in any direction. So I'm going to move that over. I'm going to scoot the unit down, and we're going to make some room. So what I can do now is scoot everything over, and let's add, we're going to scoot the description. So that gives us a little bit more room to for the description. Oh, and we accidentally overshot this one, so I'm going to pull this back. So that was easy to delete those fields and move them around, but now I want to add in a custom field. When I go into the views over here, orders, these are all the order database fields. And I'm going to go into Acctivate, and I'm going to set up a custom field at the order level. So if I go to Configuration Manager, Custom Fields, and I'm going to click Edit, Add, and we're going to call this pallet quantity. So let's say that we have a custom field on our sales order that we always type in the pallet quantity that we have. I'm going to say the type is numeric. I'm not going to go into creating custom fields too much right now. If you have any questions, take a look at our knowledge base. Okay, so I've created that report. I can come back over here. Again, I can preview it, but that doesn't add the field to the view. when I connected, it verified the data, it loaded all the database fields over, but now I need to re-verify the data. And we only need to do this. You don't need to do this anytime you make a change in Activate, only when you make a change to add a new database field, because that has changed the structure of the database view. So to do that, I can go to Database, Verify Database, and it sees the change. So the orders view has changed. Okay, it's up to date. There it is, pallet quantity. So let's go ahead and drop that into the report. Now, I know this group header 2 is the order number, and this is an order field, so I'm going to put it here. And one thing you may notice, we go back to the preview mode, it's quite a bit larger. I have, when you look at the shipped field, which is also 0.00, it's 8-point font, whereas this is 10. Now with one field, and that's the only difference is the font size, I can just decrease the font real quickly, but a feature that is really nice is right-clicking on the field and clicking Format Painter, and then clicking on the field that you want to change to match the first field. So when I do when I chose Format Painter, it turns my cursor into a paintbrush, and it's going to, for lack of a better word, paint this formatting over onto this field. So I click it and you can see that it drops down to 8. So again, with one field, not a big deal, but if you had a report maybe that showed a lot of different amounts, like a price, total amount, scheduled amount, back ordered amount, something like that, you may format them a certain way, one of them a certain way, and then want to copy that over quickly to all of them. Now you can't always use that Format Painter to format unrelated type fields. So for example, certain formatting for a number may not apply to a text field. Okay. So a little advanced trick here would be to hide the decimals. Now I know that doesn't sound advanced. It sounds like, okay, well, let's go in here and we would just use this to decrease the decimals. Or you can right click on it and we'll go into format field. So whenever we want to format a field or see some advanced formatting options, we can right click on it and choose format field. And since this is a number field, I have a numbers tab here, and I can hit customize, and here I can essentially do the same thing as move the decimal place to show so many, and same with rounding. Now the problem with doing that, with just saying I only want to show 0 decimals or 1 or 2 decimals places, is that if I say, well, I don't want to show any decimal places, and someone puts in an order in Acctivate with a quantity of 1.5, Crystal Reports would cut that 0.5 off. So a more advanced way to do it is to use the Crystal Reports formula editor. And we'll take a look at the formula editor in a few ways. Just to the right of these fields, there's this X-2 with a pencil, and that is a formula editor window. So when I open that up, I can put a formula in here that tells Crystal Reports how to handle the decimals. Now I'm going to pull up a help article we have. It's how do I adjust the number of decimals for quantity or price fields in Crystal Reports, and it's very detailed step by step. I'm going to go down here, I'm going to copy the formula. So I just highlight it, Control C. I'm going to go back to my report, and I'm going to paste it in here. Now, you don't need to understand the entire formula. The main part is the minimum decimals is 0. What this formula is going to do is it's going to show 0 decimals if possible. Now, if it needs to show decimals, it will. So I'm going to click on the rounding. I'm going to do the same thing. I don't want to round it unless it has to. I'm going to click OK. Okay. So now you can see it got rid of the decimals at the end here. So let me show you how this works. If I go into, let's go into that sales order. We'll use Western Industries. I click Edit. On the additional info tab, we do have the custom field. So I'm going to put in 1.5. And, I will, let's do another one. I'm going to click Edit on this one, and I'll just put in 5. Okay, so ABC is the customer on the order that has 5. So if I hit, I'm going to hit F5, I'm going to refresh. And here you see 5, it's showing a total of 5, no 0.0, anything like that. But if I go down to Western Industries, you'll see here it's showing 1.5. So that formula knows that it needs to show decimals, and it'll only show as many as necessary. If I had put in 1.5534, it would show 1.5534, all the way out to, I believe, 10 digits. Okay. So one of the other things that I want to do now, let me just throw on some text real quick. A suggestion of mine would be, if you're adding text, you can just insert a text object. Sorry, it's at the top here. But a lot of times what I find is easier, just click on a field, Control C, Control V, put it in here. That way it's already the right size and everything. Palette quantity. All right. So things are looking better on this report. It's almost where we need it. One thing that I really wanted to do was, this is an open orders report. It's important for me to see orders that have a large dollar amount. So in order to address that, what I want to do is I want to highlight the order subtotal if it's greater than $10,000. So as we did with the number, I'm going to right click on it and choose Format Field. And I have these formatting options, and there's a font tab, and on the font tab there's a color field. So this field is set to use the color black, and I can change the color, but I want to conditionally change it. I only want it to be red if it's over $10,000. So again, we'll use a formula editor, and something to note is if the formula editor, or if there is a formula, it will use that formula instead of whatever's set here. So if I were to change this to pink or fuchsia, it wouldn't matter. My formula is going to be the deciding factor on which color is used. Now this formula field editor window is a little bit different because it has some comments in here. And I know formulas may be an advanced concept for a lot of people, and so we probably don't need to go into it too much, but if you are creating your own formulas, I do think it's a good idea to add comments. And as you can see, the way to add a comment is just 2 forward slashes. This is a comment. This is something that is ignored when the formula is run. So it can be helpful for you or somebody else that may look at the report in the future to understand, what the formula is doing. But in this case, my formula has to return one of the following color constants. So, black, green, navy, etc. Or if you know the RGB value of a color, you can return a custom color that's, I guess, on their color spectrum. So I do have a formula that I want to enter in here, and it is, in plain English, it's if the value is over $10,000, make the font red. If not, make it black. So in my opinion, the bread and butter of the formula is in Crystal Reports is the if then else statement. So I'm going to say if, and then when I do the curly bracket, it's going to ask which view, and I can start typing in orders tab, and then I'm going to say total amount, or let's say subtotal is, I'm going to say greater than or equal to 10,000, then, and the sizing doesn't matter, but I like to keep it consistent, then CR red, else CR black. So if the subtotal is greater than or equal to 10,000, then the font should be red. Otherwise, it'll be black. Now I can hit this, I can hit save and close, and it'll tell me if there's a problem. But if you're writing a formula and you want to check it as you go, you can hit this button, and it says there's no errors found. So I can click save and close, and I'm going to click OK on that. So like I said, that's a large dollar amount. So let's see if I even have an order for that amount. And here I go. Okay. So it stands out to me in red that this order, for Ruby Baker A1510T, it has a subtotal over 10,000. So it's going to jump out at me here as being red. Again, that may be an advanced concept, but it's good to understand the possibilities there and some of that conditional formatting we have. Okay, so let's go look at some formatting options for non-numeric fields, so the text fields. I'm going to go back to the beginning. So I widened this description up a little bit. I'm going to shrink it just to illustrate a point. So you can see here the description of this paper right now wraps around to 2 lines. If I right click on it and I choose format field, I have the same tabs as the number except for instead of number it says paragraph. So same tabs as the numeric, the quantity fields, just instead of number it says paragraph. But they all have common border, font, and hyperlink. So on the common tab, there's this can grow checkbox, and that's important if you're creating reports and you're adding text fields that can hold a lot of text, such as a description. And the reason it's important is because when you're designing the report, we are limited to the width of the page. The report can grow in height, but the width is fixed. So you may create a report and have description on here, and just due to the other fields, it's limited to only being that wide. If you add the text field on, by default, if I were to add a new field that's not currently on this report, the can grow option is disabled. And what that means is the field's not allowed to grow, and so it'll cut off. It'll show as wide as it is and as high as it is, and that's it. But if you do go to format field, common can grow, you'll allow it to grow in height as much as necessary, or you can actually set a specific number of lines if you only want to cut it off at a certain point. Okay. Okay, so we've covered a lot, and time's already flying by on us here. So we've changed some formatting to the existing report structure to match what we needed, which is great. But this report doesn't quite do everything I need it to do. So let's go into the design mode. It's grouping first by the customer ID. Let's scoot over to the left. Then by the orders, then by the product. So Crystal Reports is what's defined as a banded report writer. So as you can see, there's various horizontal rows that are referred to as bands or sections. So the way Crystal Reports is designed is there is a report header at the top that prints once at the beginning of the report. And let me scoot this down so you can see. And then you have the page header section, which prints at the top of every page. Then you have the groups, the details section, which is the lowest level, the group footers, and then the report footer and a page footer. So starting with the report and page headers and footers, it's important to know that the page headers and footers have what's called reserved space. So if you were to make this footer section much larger, the page footer that is, that section is occupied and the report cannot extend into that. So you're reserving the space for the page header and footer unless it's suppressed. But if you're showing that, that space is a fixed amount that cannot be changed. It can't shrink or grow. It's a defined space. All right, so then let's talk about the report header and footer. So the report header on most Acctivate reports, I would say, is suppressed, and that's indicated by this grayed out section. And that's because there's not a lot of info that we only want to show once. The report header will show that info at the very beginning, and that's it. Whereas the page header, again, will repeat on every page. So it makes sense for us to put description and the column headers in the reports. That way, if you have a multi-page report, it's always clear what you're looking at because the headers will print at the top of every page. Now the report footer, that's used quite a bit because it does make sense to have a grand total in this case. At the very end, here's the entire total of the order. All right. So let's talk about the group. So a report may or may not have a group at all. A group is how we want to organize data records that have a similar field or trait. So This report first groups on the customer ID, like I said a moment ago, then the order number, then the line number of the order. So without these groupings, we would just have rows and rows of data that is unorganized and difficult to interpret. So let's add a grouping. In this case, the report, it looks good, but I do want to group it first by salesperson. So I'm going to go to Insert, Group, and here's where I choose the field. Now the first section shows fields that are in the report. Now I don't have the salesperson actually anywhere in this report, so I have to go select it. I'm going to go all the way down to orders, and then there's actually two in this case to choose from. There's the salesperson ID and salesperson name. So I'm going to choose salesperson ID, and I can choose how I want to sort it. I think for the most part, people probably would use in ascending order. I'm going to hit OK. Now, whenever you add a new group, it does add it after your existing groups, but we can easily move it. So what I'm going to do to move it is I'm going to click on the group header number 4 and move it up. And you can see the lines. It tells me that I put it near the top. Whenever you add a group, you're always adding a group header and footer. There's not a way to add just one or the other, but you don't have to show both of them. So I do want to show the header, but if I'm not doing some kind of summary for the at the end after that salesperson's group is run, you can right click on this and go to suppress, and that'll hide that section so you don't see it. I think I will show it though for now because I may add a total in there. So what's really nice is when you add a group, if we go up to the top, so when you add a new group in, it automatically adds that field, and we see that here. It says group number 1 salesperson ID. So it already puts the field in there. Now what you'll see here is that I have the grouping on the left resembles the grouping of the report. But this first order here, or customer Brad 3 with this order number, doesn't have a salesperson on that order, so it's blank. That's fine, but I think I'd like to do something better. I'd like to say that it's blank, so I'm going to add another formula field here real quickly. And we were using the formula fields in the formatting window, but if I want to create a formula field here, not related to formatting, I can go to the formula fields section, right click, choose new, and I'm going to call this sales person. Oops. I'm going to say if orders salesperson ID equals, and just do a blank empty string. So if it's blank, then none. Else we'll return the salesperson ID. And again, if you want to add a comment in here just to later on, this one's not overly complex, but it doesn't hurt to say, show none if there is no salesperson. Something like that can just be helpful later on. Let's save and close. And what I want to do is I want to drag this into the report. And we'll go ahead and make it bold and maybe a little bit bigger just so it stands out. So now you see it says none. There's no salesperson, but rather than just being blank, which could be confusing, we'll show the word none. And then the next group, FAH is one of my sales reps, JDJ, etc. So if I were to expand FAH, you see that the second level of grouping now is the customer. And then when you expand that, you get into their orders and then the order details. So we've added a group that changes how the data is structured in the report. So it's a pretty significant change. It's pretty easy to make. All right, so I think we have time to quickly make another change on this report. Like I said, I do want to add a total for the salesperson. Actually, no, I don't. Okay, so I want to look at a couple other quick things. Crystal Reports does come with some special fields, and there's a lot of unique fields here, but a couple of them that are important are the print date, print time, which you can see we have in the bottom of the report, and the page N of M. So the little green check mark here just tells you, that field's in use on the report somewhere. So by putting that field in here, it's really nice because when you go down to the bottom, we will see page 1 of 10. That way, if a page gets lost, you know which page you're missing or just which page you're on. Now, in certain reports, you may want to conditionally suppress this. So again, I'm going to format this field, and on the Common tab, if I check this box, it suppresses just that field. We saw suppressing a whole section, but maybe I just want to suppress this field all the time. But if I don't want to do it all the time, I only want to suppress it in certain conditions, I can use the formula editor again. I can say total page count equals 1. And again, total page count, you see it went blue. That's a function of Crystal Reports. There's a ton of features and functions like that are documented online, so you can find that stuff very easily. That's also why I like to start with a lot of our our standard reports, because you'll kind of come across a lot of that formatting. Now, in this case, my page is multiple pages, so that's not going to suppress. But if it was only one page, instead of saying page 1 of 1, it'll just hide that altogether. All right, so I have this looking great, with one exception I mentioned earlier. I did want to include booked orders. So under the report menu here, I need to change the selection formula. And I'm going to go to selection formula record. So the report, when you run a report, Crystal Reports creates a SQL query to retrieve all this data from the database, and then loads it into Crystal Reports and structures it based on the grouping that we've defined. And it also performs certain calculations, summaries, and evaluates those formulas. But to include or exclude records, we want to use this record selection formula, which is the basis for the query to get the records. And right now, it says order status in S and K, and S is scheduled and K is back ordered. B is for booked. So if I put that in there, this will now include booked orders. So I'm going to hit save and close on that. When I hit refresh, and I don't know off the top of my head an order that is a booked order. I may not really have many at all, if any at all, but that will include booked orders, and the status would show as booked. So simple change. We do have the different codes documented. It's the Acctivate code list on our knowledge base. So if you have a question as to what that value should be, SKB, what those means, you can find it there. All right, so I want to save this report, and we'll just close out of it real quick. Let's go back and Acctivate. Since I was editing it directly from that custom reports folder and I saved it back there, I don't need to come into Acctivate and change anything in the configuration manager. All I need to do is go back into the report directory. I can go to sales orders, open orders by customer, hit select. I'm going to hit preview. And here we go. So again, we saw this grouping in the report designer when I was making the report. And it's nice because it just lets you jump quickly somewhere, but you kind of get an idea of the structure here. We can hide that. But as we saw back on page 1, the top group is none, then the order, or I'm sorry, the customer, the order, the lines. Same with all of these. And if we go through, we will run across our large order that will jump out at us in red. There it is. So, again, that jumps out to us. We have our pallet quantity on here. So we made some subtle changes, several different things, some of them more simple than others, of course. I know the formula is maybe a little advanced for a lot of people, but it can do a lot of nice things for you. Okay, so time is running out. I wanted to try and answer some questions at the end. Let's see what we can talk about real quick. So in the report, there's a common question about adding additional views in here. This can get a little bit more complex. I'm really not going to go into it too much. So if I go to database expert, here is where I would select the views. So what I would want to do is I want to come over here. I'm going to expand Brad Desktop. Since I closed it, it's going to ask for that connection information again. And I'm going to expand. Oh, actually, hold on. I need to connect to this one. Okay, so I'm going to expand to demo 2, go down to views. So if I wanted to add another view in here, I would select the view. So let's say, what would be a good view to add in here? I want to add in the product warehouse summary, which contains the quantity value for the warehouse, quantities and values for the warehouse. I'll click right to add it. And then I'm going to go to the links tab. And this is where it can get complex. I won't go into this too much, but I have to link this view to the other views. Now, it does some auto linking for me. I'm going to remove all those links because I know they're not right. It just guesses based on names, but that's not entirely accurate. And this can get kind of complicated because I want to make sure that I'm matching on the same view. And we always suggest using the GUIDs when possible because the GUIDs are unique. It's going to eliminate duplicates, and I think there's potentially some performance improvements there, but it'll definitely eliminate any duplicates based on, for example, you're allowed to change the name of a product in Acctivate. Now the GUID never changes. That's like the unique identifier in the database. So if you rename the product, it's okay. The GUID is what is used to match things, and it's much more reliable. Now, in this case, you would also need to know that we want to link to the GUID warehouse. I can change the link options to left outer join. So that gets into some complex stuff that it's a lot to cover, and we're already running out of time. But you would want to come in here to join it, and then you'd hit OK. And then now, if we preview this, let's see, view, field explorer. So now when I come over here, I have those fields from the product warehouse summary view to add into the report. All right. Oh, yes. Something else that I didn't mention that I wanted to talk about. When I first opened it up, it prompted me for these values. So it says enter values, and it was company name and selections. These are what's called parameters. And what you'll notice is when I preview the report in here, the company name parameter is here, but it's blank. But in Acctivate, it was filling in. So that is a custom parameter. Acctivate has a few that we've created that are specific to Acctivate, and they're documented on our knowledge base. It's just look for crystal report parameters, but underscore company name and underscore selections will populate based on your Acctivate database data, so your company name. A lot of our order related forms like the invoice, the pick ticket pack list, things like that that have your company address, those are pulling from the configuration manager. And so again, it's using a parameter for that. What selections shows us is let me, I can show you what this does. If I say the order date is this week, we'll just leave it at that and I hit preview. So when I go down to the bottom, it takes whatever you've entered in on that screen, the parameters, and puts it in sentence form down here. So that way, if you run a report and you put it to the side and you look at it and something seems odd, like it's missing data, you may look down here and it may tell you why you're missing data because we're only looking at orders for this week or for this customer, or these products. So it's just a way to, log or track that onto the report, what those parameters were. Okay. Just looking through a few more questions here. So if you create a new report from scratch, it's not a copy of our existing one. You will have to set it up in the configuration manager. So since I was just modifying a report, I didn't have to come in here and do this. But if I go to the reports section, I click on report catalog, and let's say I was making a derivative of this report. So it's we're looking at this open orders by customer, but now I want to set it up as something different. I can copy this report save it in the same location and just give it a different name. So the report ID isn't that meaningful, it just has to be unique. So I could be, customer by rep. We already have a report like this, but open orders by customer by rep. And then, yeah, I would copy it, and then I would look up the new file. So that way you can have, rather than just replacing it, maybe you do want to keep the original and then create a copy that is slightly different. The best way to do that is copy, because that way it'll already have all these parameters filled out. And the description, you'd probably want to modify this description though. Okay. In terms of formatting options, just taking a look at one more thing. I did talk about the suppress. Checking it will just suppress the field altogether. You can conditionally suppress it using a formula. Then there's suppress if duplicated. So if you have any value that is repeated multiple times, so for example, I don't have it on here, but if I had a warehouse, a column for the warehouse, and every line on that order has the same warehouse, I may not want to show that every time. It just seems redundant. So I could right click on that field, go to format field, and check suppress if duplicated, and that'll prevent it from showing every time, only when there's a change, and it just keeps things a little bit cleaner in some cases. Some of the other formatting options are the borders. What's nice is here, if I'm on this description, you can just come up here and you can choose a single side, all sides, or single side. But if you right click on it and choose format field, the border has some more options here. So you can have single, double, dashed, and dotted. And that is what we see, over here on some of these fields, I think. Oops. Oh. Well, maybe not. But like if I want to change, I can control both of those and I can format objects. And maybe for the border, I want to make these now a double line. It's done really easy. So it's nice when you have multiple groups, like, oh yeah, we do have it up here. Or no, I just changed that. So we do have, it's nice when you have multiple groups, kind of better differentiates the information. All right, so I know that webinar went by very quickly, and I feel like we just touched the tip of the iceberg, and I wish we could spend a lot more time together on this. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. I will say Crystal Reports is not our product, so some of our troubleshooting and support's limited. We can, however, help with any questions on how to connect to Acctivate, Crystal Reports to the Acctivate database, and help explain some of the database structure if you have questions where information can be found. I think we have a lot of that documented on our website, so feel free to check that out. If you don't have Crystal Reports and you don't think you want to purchase it, but you would like a way to get data out of the database, we do have a webinar and some documents on our knowledge base about using Microsoft Excel queries, which allows you to connect Excel to the Microsoft SQL Server database that Acctivate uses and query the information directly into Excel. With Crystal, it's nice to have all that formatting, but I know a lot of people prefer to have the raw data in Excel and then manipulate it from there. So that's definitely an option for anyone who's more comfortable working in Excel. Thank you for the time, and I look forward to hearing from you guys, and I hope you have a great week. Thank you.